I'm really glad that I stumbled upon your course, and I was just surfing Google, and I can't even remember like how I came across your blog, but it was really helpful, and I'm really lucky that I did. Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear it. So you've been in the courses for...
I think it's almost been 2 months, I would say.
2 months. Excellent. So what would you say is the biggest insight you've gotten so far?
So I think the biggest insight would be to trust your instincts more, especially for logic games. Like sometimes when I'm struggling with, whether to split into main diagrams or core diagrams, or to kind of take the rules and kind of like know it by heart and to just head straight to the questions. I feel like sometimes, there's always strategies involved, but sometimes I feel like it's with every question it's different. And so it's helpful to just kind of trust your gut sometimes. I've mostly been focusing with logic games so far, just because I know that it's kind of like my weakest area, and like you said, it's the easiest section to improve on, and I can definitely agree with that. And so it's mostly just been logic games for me. I'm like really focusing on that right now.
I'm really glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear it's been helpful, and you should trust your instincts. You do have the abilities within yourself, and my job is to draw your ability out and help you apply your aptitude to the questions. And so a lot of the questions that you were sending me, I actually noticed they were kind of more nuanced, detailed, higher level questions, which suggests to me that you've already got a lot of the basics down. So that was good to see.
It definitely took a while to get there, but I think with practice, like the more, and redoing the questions, I would usually wait a week or so to redo the question that's in your study schedule. And like every time I redo it, even though like sometimes I still don't get it right, but the more that I redo it, the more like the higher the accuracy, and the more that I'm like realizing, certain parts where if I just like kind of like use that inference and kind of like play around with it, I can like shave off like 10 seconds or like 20 seconds. And like with each time round, like that's like a lot of seconds. That's like 40 seconds, which is like almost like a minute. And that's kind of a huge game changer.
That's the amazing thing, is that this time saved, it scales, it builds up. And so that means that if you could at the end of a game still have a minute or two remaining to either apply to the following game, which might be tougher, or double check something, that really does build on itself and benefits you in the long run and gives you more time to handle these more complicated rules like biconditionals, or like these more unique in-out games where the conditional statements do not connect.
Yeah. When I do the questions that are just trickier, like with biconditionals or with rules, or like with not even that many rules, like 2 or 3 rules and a lot of like moving parts and you can't really make any like main diagrams, and like I really rely on making main diagrams. I feel more comfortable and more confident when I have like 4 or like 7 core diagrams to kind of like go with, and like knowing that there are a limited number of possible scenarios, that's like very comforting. And when I don't have that, I think that's what throws me off. It really kind of just like throws up like my balance. And I'm thinking if there's any way to kind of like fight through that and just like kind of still keep a steady pace and not panic.
Sure. And so I totally get where you're coming from. There are a lot of students in the exact same boat where they like these games where these multiple main diagrams break the game wide open. And so the question for you is, what can you do to feel more comfortable when you're thrown a curveball? What could you do now to prepare for that curveball? And the answer, of course, is give yourself a lot of curveballs now so that you're not going to encounter them later on test day and be totally taken by surprise. I have a list of curveball games. Have you seen it?
It's on your blog, right?
It is
like one of the top 10 hardest logic games? Or
there are the top 10 hardest, but I also have a newer list of curveball games. Email me after this call and I'll send you the link. And this is the list of every curveball game from exam 1 up to exam 80. These are the games that do not fit the mold. They break the mold. They are unfamiliar. Sometimes the diagram is just weird. Sometimes there's not much of a single main diagram to make at all. And so the question is, how do you handle it? How do you adapt your skills to a game type that does not fall within the neatly pre-prescribed categories? Because LSAC does want to throw those curveballs. They do want to challenge people who are too rigid in their thinking and blindly copying someone else's technique. And so the answer is not to apply the strategy that doesn't work for the situation. Like, you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. You've got to take a different approach. And ultimately, what you will see as you work through this list is that a lot of these games, although they may not appear similar to others on the surface, and the way in which you diagram them may be different, the underlying logic is still at its core the same.
Right, yeah. Because sometimes when I'm doing the logic games, I would kind of like think in that like advanced linear mindset, but then I would be dealing with like a grouping game. And so that just the strategies that I would typically use for linear games wouldn't apply as smoothly and as effectively for grouping. And then that would be like 2 minutes gone, like down the drain, and like nothing like useful coming out of it. And so, and then that's when the panic kind of kicks in, because you kind of have to like start from scratch again and like kind of apply the grouping strategy mindset.
Exactly. So I want to suggest for you that you slow down just a little bit and make sure that you're using the right tool for the job. I saw you ask me about, just in general, I think you were asking, was it about logical reasoning and reading comp, about sacrificing time and slowing down? And I actually want to relate that to games just a little bit, where sometimes a little bit of slowing down up front could even be beneficial in the long run, because if you don't realize a mistake until 3 or 4 minutes have passed, of course, that was really valuable time. And so just an extra moment at the beginning of a game to double check could be really useful in the long run.
Yeah, that would definitely help.
Now, with regard to your question on biconditionals, how to better understand them, ultimately, this is a lot of what happens on the LSAT in terms of unfamiliar things that are complex. You want to expose yourself to them now and take the time to thoroughly understand them now, so that on test day, you won't be reinventing the wheel or rediscovering the formula to solve that rule or that question type. Like biconditionals, they're confusing, and they could be presented in increasingly confusing ways. And I want you to see that language on test day and automatically know exactly what to do, rather than having to reason through it for the first time. Like, you've done tons of contrapositives by now, right? If you were doing contrapositive for the first time, it would take a while. And so you don't want to be doing that during a 35-minute timed section for the first time. Biconditionals are also conditional formal logic. They're just different in some way. And because they appear less commonly, they're more unfamiliar. And so do a bunch of those and take the time now to reason through them, so that on test day, it won't be anything new. There were a couple of games in the 50s, exams 50, 51, and 52, 3 consecutive exams that contained confusing conditional statements. If you just flip through those exams, you'll see what I'm talking about, where it's either this or that, but not both. Really weird, kind of confusing. How do you diagram that? Obviously, first time you see it, it's going to be weird. It's going to be hard. And so people who did exam 50 as their real exam, they were thrown for a loop, and I don't blame them. It was a relatively new thing. But exam 51 and exam 52, you could have looked back at the previous exam or two, done those exams, done those games, and then for exam 52, it would be nothing new to you. If you had done those previous ones, it would have been much easier. So just exposing yourself to that wide variety of complex rules, complex games, so that when you're seeing it, you know exactly what to do in the moment.
Yeah, like I've obviously gotten used to contrapositives, and then there's, you know, the 2 other rules where it's like you need to have at least one out, and it could be both, or you need to have at least one in, and it could be both in. And so obviously, like the first few go arounds, it was kind of like hard to like catch the nuances, but now it's like, okay, like I kind of like see what's coming and kind of like prep myself to like know what to do. And then like I would just have to like, practice more for the biconditionals. But I was also wondering, aside from, counterpositives and like the at least one in or at least one out and biconditionals, are there any other more like just trickier like conditional chains or other things that's, like there's still a pattern to it, but it's on an advanced level? I was wondering if there's like a list on your blog that kind of like tackles those trickier parts.
Well, the thing is, as we get more complex, as things get trickier, there are fewer of each type, to the point that each single game is unique in some way. It might include one particular rule that's difficult, but these don't really relate that much to each other. The best place to go if you're looking for these higher level, more complex games is this list of curveball games. Because what they all have in common is simply that they are rare and unfamiliar. They don't relate that much to each other in terms of their surface level logic. But how they do relate is that they're all unfamiliar and they're all likely to throw you for a loop in one way or the other. And so the best thing I would suggest for you is run through all of those games in order, if you like, just to see how you deal with unfamiliar situations. And of course, you can look at the explanations afterwards, but I do suggest at first trying to puzzle through it on your own.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So I will look at that list and then prep test 50, 51, and 52 for the time being. Okay.
I remember you also asked about test 58 game 4 with these conditionals that don't really relate. That's another tough thing. Yeah, it is. I mean, test 58 game 2 has long conditional chains that do, where you can link them all together. 58 game 4 is one of these curveballs. And I have tactics to handle it. I have a video walkthrough on my site where I walk through exactly my technique for solving it. But that's one of those things where you've got to think a little bit outside the box more, like the curve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was also wondering for study schedules. So I've put in like around 3 months, like 2 more like hardcore months of studying, and mostly like logic games. I'm trying to like really like get a better handle of it and like really lock down the fundamentals. And I was wondering if, because like I'm a rising senior in college, and there's only so much time in your school, and I know that I won't be taking the LSAT anytime soon because I don't feel ready. But I was wondering if like when is the best time to kind of take the LSAT? And this is like kind of like a more like personalized like thing. Like it kind of depends with like different people. But I guess like from your experience and from the students that you've mentored, like what's like, I guess just like what are some advices that you would give for people who are not going straight to law school but do want to take the LSAT and just get a good score and like have it down so that I don't have to like think about it and like study for it while I'm working or like graduating and all that?
Yeah, sure. Well, you've been studying for a while, and you've been studying pretty rigorously from what I gather over the summer so far. And so if that's the case, I would recommend taking it relatively soon while all this work is still fresh for you and you don't get too carried away or distracted by your school obligations. So maybe you want to take it in October or November if you can. Lock it down, and that way you have your score secured. Scores are good for 5 years, so you do have a while even if you don't apply immediately. You could also study a bit less over the fall semester, then study a lot over winter break and take it in January. And that way you have the benefit of what I assume would be more time over winter break to prep, take full-length timed exams, review them in detail, refresh yourself, take it in January, and be done with it. Of course, if you are taking it in January, I would recommend ideally not applying this current cycle, but in the following cycle so that you can apply more towards the beginning when odds are a little bit better and there's more scholarship money available as well.
Okay. Yeah.
It does become tough though once you're out of school and you're working, because then you've got a full-time job and you want to have personal time, and you want to study as well. So it becomes a bit tougher then. I think it's easier while you're still in school and still in a more academic mindset, all else being equal. Because the responsibilities only layer as you get older, and so it becomes tougher to fit in the time. So I think now you've got a good opportunity. Alternatively, if you graduate and you choose to not work for a while, and you had, let's say, next summer after you graduate relatively free, you could use that extra time to study as well. But I don't know how much you want to lengthen your LSAT study timeline and how long you want to keep this as part of your life.
Yeah, I think right now my baseline is to, like, I will spend as much time as I can to get a good score. And I'm, obviously like at least 160, but my goal is to hit 170 plus. And so for me, it's like, it doesn't matter how much time I take. I will take as long as I need to get that top score, because then, there's going to be more scholarships, like you said, and there's going to be more opportunities and for like the higher, the reach schools. So I'm like willing to spend as much time as I can, even if it takes a year or more than a year. So I think that I'm like mentally prepared for that. So, but yeah, I think I agree with you that it's also nice, like, while I'm still in the grind, to kind of get it over with and be in that kind of like school setting and kind of like juggle different obligations and responsibilities. So yeah, a lot to consider, but yeah.
Exactly. Well, you strike me as being incredibly determined and motivated, and those are the folks who do the best in the end because you're willing to invest the time. It does take longer than 2 to 3 months. It typically takes at least 5 to 6 months, if not longer, in order to reach your fullest potential. And it sounds like you're willing to put in the time, even if it means doing this after you've already graduated college to get that 170 plus. And so I have no doubt you'll get there if you keep putting in the work.
Yeah, and because I know some people who are working as paralegals right now, and they're still juggling with LSAT prep, and it's just been really tough for them. And I just don't want to go down that road because it looks very stressful.
Sure, it is.
To like, be on the earlier end just in case I need to retake or I need more time to study. So I'm like trying to like figure out a very long study schedule and kind of like play around with it if need be.
Excellent. Great. And you've been using my study schedules, right? Along with the courses?
Yeah. And I use a lot of like online forums and from like other videos and just anything that could be of help to me, because there's like so many different logic game strategies out there, and it's sometimes some of them don't really click with me, and then the others, I see like the kind of logic behind it and I can understand it and grasp it on a more deeper level, just kind of like seeing what fits me the best.
Exactly. I think it's good to have a flexible, fluid approach. Don't just blindly copy one person's perfect way of doing it. Look at the different sources out there and then find what works best for you for any individual situation, and then kind of organize it into your own mental framework that you can apply to new games that you see.
Right. Exactly.
Awesome. Great. Well, it's been a pleasure connecting with you today, Nazrin. What would you say is the biggest insight you got from our session today?
The biggest insight would be to be flexible with the approaches to logic games, because obviously the LSAT is trying to trip you up, and so don't always overly rely on the set in stone of come up with 4 core diagrams, come up with like 7, or just be more adapt to the rules and to each game.
Excellent. Great. I love it. Take that especially with the list of curveball games as you work through them. Keep that in mind as you move forward.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.